Chapter 4 Twists and Turns. Gusting stronger now, the mistral influenced Gaston's decision to return to his cabin. It had been breezy all morning, with sun struggling to peek through the occasional cracks in the greyness, but even these now closed firm overhead, limiting brightness to only the distant horizon. The coastal wind chill sharpened and Gaston found himself, alone as usual, on this wide, desolate beach. Today's catch, if it could be called that, had been meagre. Gaston was experienced enough to know when to call it a day. Getting on for 11 o'clock as it was, lunchtime beckoned. He collapsed his folding stool, packed his rod, basket and net, whistling for his dog to join him. Maybe after lunch he would try again, somewhere further along the coast where different fish were rumoured to bite. As he trudged along this deserted beach, over patterned peaks of fine sand towards the pale windswept grasses, he noticed two dark figures approaching along the distant shoreline. He made it a personal policy to avoid having much to do with townies, and these looked exactly like townies. He had always generalised them as being sharp operators, unused to the eternal ways of the countryside. He strode off into the long grass, but his dog delayed him, having found something unpleasant washed up in the surf. He whistled again more urgently and waited. The dog abandoned its find, but instead ran off towards the girl, who herself had run forward some way towards them, while the other townie remained in the distance, apparently taking photos. Ignoring its feeble warning barks, she welcomed the young Brittany Spaniel, stroking it happily as it skipped playfully around her. Bending over to catch her breath, she managed a whispered "Bonjour" to the fisherman. He calmed the spaniel down with a wave of his hand over its eyes so that they could talk, somewhat grudgingly on his part. Whatever she wanted did seem to have a peculiar urgency or importance, as it was rare to see anyone here, let alone strangers from out of town. He started to impart some excuse along the lines of having a traditional ancestral claim to fish in this area, and that he had hardly caught anything in recent months anyway, to which Corinne replied that she wasn't from the government or any official body related to fishing, which pleased and puzzled Gaston equally. Gaston hardly moved his lips when he spoke, and only then in a broad dialect of Occitan which Corinne could barely understand, especially when the wind blew so strongly that she could hardly hear him. She asked him to repeat a few words, and he soon realised that she wasn't from around these parts. Corinne implied that she was an English tourist, and that she had come to see if her cousin was anywhere around here, which surprised Gaston somewhat. Apparently her cousin came to this beach sometimes, and had recently gone missing. It wasn't every day that Gaston met a young English girl with such an intriguing situation, and soon he became less stern toward her. As they spoke, the spaniel returned to investigate the dead bird. "Perrin!" Gaston whistled and called repeatedly. The dog took little notice. Gaston walked over to pull the dog away, as Laurent joined them, phone in hand. Gaston explained that it was a common tern. He used to see them all the time a few years ago, both alive and occasionally washed up dead like this one, but not so much nowadays. As with those, this bird had no visible wounds or injuries, neither emaciated nor oily. Maybe it was just ill, or perhaps somehow poisoned. As terns are migratory birds, maybe they were poisoned elsewhere, fell into the sea and washed up here. At the cabin, Laurent sipped pastis, while Gaston, who was boiling water on a tiny grotty stove for Corinne's coffee, told of his life in Carnon and the Camargue. The old fisherman had lived there almost his whole life, apart from a brief spell when he served in Algeria. Even his post-war childhood was spent in the next hamlet along. The cabin was an horrendously ramshackle hut, hardly worthy of so grand a title as cabane, decorated as it was with a few ancient calendars, some yellow newspaper cuttings of someone playing pétanque, lightly rusted advertising tins, a transistor radio, plenty of old netting in need of repair, and a small table with a grubby pack of cards on it separating two very small rustic stools. Even the dog didn't seem especially comfortable in the place, an opinion that Corinne shared. Apparently Gaston's real address was a small apartment in Carnon with his sister, which sounded infinitely more agreeable, but as the siblings didn't always see eye to eye, Gaston spent the best part of the warmer months in the cabin whenever he could. As he frequently went fishing before dawn, then snoozed away the afternoons, this really fitted in well with Amandine's living plans, so he found himself here more often than not. Corinne opened the conversation by asking if Gaston had ever seen or met Gary, but after some interruptions with the drinks, Gaston commented that she spoke French well, so well in fact that he could hardly tell she was English. before embarking on a lengthy diatribe expounding why he could never learn another language, and why there was no need, as everyone can understand each other well enough by miming, shrugging and pointing anyway, as he did in Algeria. Laurent seemingly agreed, while Corinne smiled superficially, somewhat peeved. After this, she rather zoned out due to the extreme effort required to understand Occitan so badly mumbled. Instead, she stroked Perrin and cupped her hot coffee in both of her cold hands, as the two Frenchmen discussed a convoluted affair of local politics in a typically heated and excitable way. 40 minutes later they waved goodbye to the fisherman as he closed his cabin door, and they trudged back across the grassy dunes towards civilization, shoulders hunched as the mistral gusted light rain at them. "So what was all that about?" Corinne asked, once they were out of earshot. "Couldn't you understand us just from the miming and the shrugging?" Laurent replied jokingly. "You know I couldn't. Why do idiots always say that? I'd like to see him—" He didn't mean anything by it. As it turns out, the old guy was a mine of information. "How can he be if he never met Gary?" she asked. "That doesn't matter. He has been fishing here since the 1970s, when this area was first designated for development. As it is an area of natural interest and beauty, evidently it was to become a resort for genteel recreation. You know, land yachts, kites, fishing, bird watching, scuba diving, that sort of thing. Creating a few jobs and boosting the local economy with a kind of eco-tourism," Laurent explained. "When did that happen? Is it half-day closing or something?" "No, when it's lunchtime, France looks like this." Laurent waved his arm, demonstrating the barren landscape all around, with nobody in sight for miles. "I joke. No, he said that in the 1980s different governments and local councils prevented the redevelopment, as ecological groups said it would grow, become too much, with shops, cafes, bars, jet skis, speedboats, ruining the nature of the area." "They were probably right," Corinne agreed. So nothing happened. Years later, further inland, scientists discovered a seam of oil that ran deep under the town and under the seabed. But this wasn't normal oil, it was a special kind of mineral oil. I need to look this up, as Gaston didn't seem very certain. But apparently it was ideal for making some kind of plastic microchips. Very expensive plastic that otherwise cannot be made without costly processing and importing of chemicals and oil. Laurent didn't really understand fully, but he reckoned to have caught the gist from Gaston, who didn't really understand fully either. "So this place could have become like a valet plastique," wondered Corinne. "This kind of plastic is for making very particular computers, chips and flexible screens, but in the Far East, of course. So although it would have been formidable for the economy here if they made these kinds of things, they don't, so it would all have been exported. It would just spoil the local area and desolate the local villages. I guess after a few small protests..." Laurent shrugged. He wanted to avoid straying unduly into the nitty-gritty behind the politics and science. He needed to know only enough to find out what happened to Gary, how and why. "Surely your client knew all this before he called you? And anyway, there doesn't seem to be much industry around. Nothing ever happened here, so that was all pie in the sky." Laurent hesitated, mentally picturing pies floating in the clouds, until he grasped the question, then he didn't know the answer. Corinne had a point. The sky brightened as they walked a while in silence, thinking over what they knew and where the gaps were in their reasoning. "I took some photos of that turn and the beach, which according to the chemical printout on my phone GPS was the exact location from where the sample was taken. I think it's a fairly safe guess that Gary himself took the sample around the 11th or so, a few weeks before he disappeared," said Laurent, showing his phone to Corinne and scrolling through the most recent photos on the touchscreen, which were of several drab grey coastal scenes and a close-up of the unfortunate bird. "I must see your holiday albums next time I'm feeling down. Can we go somewhere warm and grab a hot chocolate or something? I need something to take away the taste of that coffee, and I'm getting wet through here playing detective," Corinne whined, trying to hold her hair from totally covering her face. "It's probably only another 2 or 3 kilometres walk. Maybe there's a hot dog van or something," Laurent replied, zipping his jacket right up. "You really know how to spoil a lady, thanks," Corinne answered sarcastically. "My elbow still hurts from escaping through that narrow bathroom window in the dark. You said you were going to catch me. And anyway, you never did say why we needed to run."